Carl Jung once said that the privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are. This sentence alone could be enough to spend an entire life contemplating, because it points to the deepest human struggle, the journey of finding oneself amid the noise of the world. When we look at Jung's philosophy, what emerges is not a dry theory of psychology, but a living guide for how to face suffering, loneliness, love, fear, and ultimately, meaning. His work was not just about diagnosing the human mind but about awakening the soul. In these lessons, there is no abstract distance. They touch daily existence with precision and honesty. The first lesson begins with the shadow. Jung believed that every person carries within them a side they try to deny or hide. This shadow is not only the darkness of anger, jealousy, or selfishness. It is also the unused strength, the courage that was never expressed, the desires buried under fear of judgment. Jung's lesson is that by refusing to face the shadow, we remain half alive. It is only when we turn to it with humility and courage that we stop projecting our darkness onto others and start reclaiming our own wholeness. To live authentically, one must embrace the uncomfortable truth that every human being is both light and dark. Denial breeds weakness. Acceptance builds strength. The second lesson flows naturally from this. It is the lesson of individuation, the process of becoming whole. Jung observed that most people live according to masks, what he called personas. These are the roles we play to be accepted, the polite smiles, the professional identities, the versions of ourselves tailored to please. The danger is that we begin to mistake the mask for our real face. Individuation means slowly peeling away what is false, daring to see what remains, and building a life rooted in that reality. It is not an easy path. Society rewards conformity. Family expectations and cultural traditions often bind us tightly. Yet Jung insisted that unless one dares to walk the inner path, there can be no true fulfillment. To individuate is to accept the pain of solitude, the weight of responsibility, and the joy of becoming someone who belongs to themselves. The third lesson lies in Jung's understanding of the unconscious. He saw it not as a mere storage of forgotten memories but as a living realm of symbols, myths, and archetypes. The unconscious is like an ancient well, holding wisdom deeper than our rational thoughts. It speaks through dreams, sudden intuitions, and the mysterious pull of symbols that fascinate us without explanation. Jung believed that ignoring the unconscious is like trying to live in daylight while pretending night does not exist. Both are needed for balance. By paying attention to dreams, art, and imagination, we tap into a layer of meaning that rationality alone can never provide. For Jung, to honor the unconscious is to re-establish a dialogue with the soul, something modern life often suppresses in the rush for productivity and external success. The fourth lesson teaches us about suffering. Jung did not treat pain as something to be eliminated at all costs. Instead, he saw it as the very material of transformation. Every wound, he believed, carries a hidden potential for growth. To run from suffering is to remain shallow, but to endure it with awareness is to uncover a new dimension of being. Jung himself endured many years of inner turmoil, marked by visions and confrontations with the darkest parts of his psyche. He called this period his confrontation with the unconscious, and he emerged from it not broken but renewed. In this he shows us that suffering is not the end but a doorway, if we are willing to pass through with patience and honesty. The fifth lesson is rooted in love and relationships. Jung observed that we often look for our missing parts in others. What draws us most intensely to another person is often the reflection of our own hidden self. Love is therefore not only about companionship but about recognition of the deeper layers within ourselves. Yet Jung warned that when we idealize others too strongly, we burden them with carrying our unconscious projections. The challenge is to love another not as a savior but as a mirror, and at the same time, to take responsibility for our own wholeness. This does not diminish love. Instead, it deepens it, turning passion into a partnership of growth rather than dependence. These 5 lessons already weave together a philosophy of life that feels both timeless and deeply personal. They remind us that to live as Jung taught is not to chase perfection but to integrate what has been divided within us. The shadow demands honesty. Individuation demands courage. The unconscious demands attention. Suffering demands patience. Love demands humility. Together, they form the beginning of a map for the soul. This is only the opening of Jung's wisdom. More lessons unfold as we continue, each building on the last, creating a tapestry of understanding that guides us through the struggles of existence. His philosophy is not about escaping life but about entering it fully, with eyes open to both its darkness and its light. The sixth lesson from Jung speaks of meaning. He saw clearly that the greatest suffering of modern man was not hunger or poverty but the emptiness that comes when life is stripped of purpose. Jung worked with patients who had wealth and comfort, yet they came to him in despair, unable to find reason to continue. He believed that a human being cannot live without meaning, that we are not satisfied with survival alone. We hunger for a story, a vision of why we exist. For Jung, meaning is not handed down from authority or fixed in dogma. It arises from the individual soul, from the willingness to search, to listen to the voice within, and to align life with something larger than personal gain. To live without meaning is to be restless even in comfort. To live with meaning is to carry strength even in hardship. The seventh lesson reveals itself in the power of symbols and myth. Jung believed that human beings are not purely rational creatures. Beneath the surface, we are guided by deep archetypes, patterns of story and image that repeat across cultures and history. Myths of heroes, mothers, tricksters, wise old guides, these are not fictions but expressions of the collective unconscious. Jung taught that ignoring myth and symbol leaves us spiritually malnourished. In dreams, in art, in religion, these images carry the wisdom of centuries, echoing truths that logic alone cannot grasp. To pay attention to symbols is to connect with humanity across time. It is to realize that our individual struggles are not isolated accidents, but part of a vast story shared by all who came before. When we recognize our place in this larger myth, life no longer feels random. It feels woven into a fabric of meaning that transcends our brief years. The eighth lesson is about balance, or what Jung often described as the union of opposites. He saw that human beings are torn between contradictions, between reason and instinct, between masculine and feminine, between the conscious and unconscious. Most of us choose one side and reject the other, but this rejection creates inner conflict. Jung's wisdom was that true growth lies not in destroying one side but in reconciling the two. Wholeness is the union of light and shadow, order and chaos, strength and vulnerability. To live one-sided is to limp through life. To unite opposites is to walk steadily, carrying both sides of our nature without shame. This union does not erase conflict, but it transforms it into a creative tension, a source of energy that can be directed toward growth. The ninth lesson rests in the mystery of the self, which for Jung was far greater than the ego. The ego is the conscious identity we cling to, but the self is the totality of the psyche, both conscious and unconscious, both what we know and what we do not yet know. To approach the self is to encounter the sacred, the divine center that holds life together. Jung often described this as a religious experience, not bound to doctrine but to the direct experience of depth. To realize the self is to see that we are more than our fears, more than our temporary roles, more than the fragile ego that struggles for control. It is to touch the eternal within, the part of us that whispers through dreams and symbols, guiding us toward wholeness. Taken together, these lessons complete a circle. Jung did not offer an escape from life but a deeper immersion into it. He taught that the path is not linear but cyclical, moving from shadow to light, from suffering to meaning, from fragmentation to wholeness. Each lesson is both a challenge and a comfort. They remind us that the task of life is not to avoid struggle but to transform it into wisdom, not to deny complexity but to embrace it until it reveals its hidden order. Jung's philosophy does not promise ease, but it offers depth. It is a path for those who wish to live fully awake, who refuse to settle for shallow happiness, and instead yearn for a life that touches eternity. In following his wisdom, one begins to see that every dream, every loss, every love, every fear, is part of a greater story unfolding within. This completes the 9 life lessons, but their implications ripple endlessly. In the next part, we will turn from the structure of these lessons to their living application, exploring how Jung's ideas breathe into daily life and shape the way we walk through a world that is both fragile and profound. When we begin to carry Jung's lessons into daily life, they stop being abstract principles and start becoming living companions. His ideas are not meant to remain locked in books. They are tools for facing mornings filled with doubt, nights that ache with loneliness, and the ordinary moments that quietly shape the soul. Part of Jung's greatness was his insistence that psychology was never just about the clinic. It was about life itself, about how each person makes sense of the chaos within and without. Take the lesson of the shadow. It is easy to treat it as an intellectual concept, but its reality is felt in the irritation toward a colleague, the jealousy toward a friend, the sudden surge of anger we cannot explain. Each time these feelings arise, we have a choice. We can deny them, pretending they do not exist, which only drives them deeper into the unconscious where they grow in power. Or we can pause, breathe, and admit that what we see in another is also alive within us. This small act of honesty turns the shadow from an enemy into a teacher. Over time, it makes us gentler with others, because we begin to see that their flaws are not so different from our own. Individuation, too, is not a distant goal but a daily practice. It shows itself when someone leaves a career that never felt right, when an artist dares to paint what no one else approves of, when a person walks away from an expectation that was slowly suffocating them. To individuate is not to rebel blindly. It is to listen quietly for the voice within, the voice that says you are more than what the world demands of you. Every choice made in alignment with that inner voice is a step toward wholeness, and though the path may bring solitude, it also brings an unshakable strength that no approval can give. The unconscious, which Jung compared to a deep ocean, also becomes practical when we learn to listen. A dream that startles us awake in the middle of the night may carry more truth than a week of conscious reasoning. An image that fascinates us without explanation may point to something our soul longs for. Jung encouraged his patients to record their dreams, to paint their inner visions, to engage with imagination as if it were alive. In doing so, life expands beyond the narrow corridors of logic. We discover that the unconscious is not an enemy but a guide, offering images that, if we honor them, lead us toward healing and creation. Jung's perspective on suffering also changes the way we endure hardship. When betrayal stings, when illness weakens, when loneliness becomes unbearable, it is natural to want the pain gone. But Jung's lesson is that every wound carries meaning. The task is not to romanticize suffering, but to face it with the faith that within it lies the possibility of growth. Many who endure great pain find themselves afterwards more compassionate, more grounded, more aware of what truly matters. Suffering breaks illusions, and in that breaking, it prepares the ground for something real to take root. Even love, through Jung's lens, becomes a path of transformation. The excitement of falling in love often hides the deeper truth that we are meeting ourselves in the mirror of another. The beauty we see in them reflects the beauty we have forgotten in ourselves, and the frustrations we feel reveal the shadows we still need to face. To love well is to take responsibility for what we project, to recognize that no partner can carry the entire weight of our unacknowledged soul. When this understanding matures, relationships move beyond possession and dependency. They become places of growth, where two individuals walk together not because they complete each other, but because they both seek wholeness. Through these practices, Jung's lessons dissolve into daily living. They are there in the arguments that teach patience, in the dreams that whisper of forgotten truths, in the courage it takes to leave behind masks, and in the quiet resilience found in pain. They remind us that every moment, even the most ordinary, is part of the soul's unfolding. To live in this way is to treat life itself as a dialogue with the unconscious, as a journey of integration, and as a search for meaning that never ends. In this, Jung does not promise us ease, but he offers us dignity. He shows that even in the darkest hours, life can still be shaped into a story of transformation. In the next part, we will move deeper into Jung's vision of meaning, myth, and the self, exploring how these elements connect us not only to our individual lives but to the vast collective story of humanity. Jung's thought becomes most powerful when it reaches beyond the individual and touches the collective story of humanity. He never saw a human life as an isolated fragment. Each person carries within them the echoes of countless generations, the weight of forgotten myths, and the voices of ancestors that whisper through dreams and symbols. In this sense, to know oneself is also to know the larger whole of which one is a part. The search for meaning cannot be separated from the search for connection with something greater than the narrow self. The unconscious, in Jung's understanding, is not merely personal. It is also collective, a deep reservoir where the timeless patterns of human experience live on. When we dream of a journey, a struggle, a mysterious guide, or a terrifying darkness, we are tapping into images that have appeared in every culture since the beginning of storytelling. Jung called these archetypes, and he believed they were the universal language of the soul. Myths of gods and heroes, stories of creation and destruction, visions of love and betrayal, they do not fade because they are woven into the very structure of human life. They appear to remind us that our struggles are not new, and our joys are not solitary. This insight gives daily life a different weight. When someone feels lost and suffering, their pain is not only their own but part of an ancient pattern. The myth of descent into darkness followed by renewal belongs to everyone. It is told in the journey of Persephone, in the trials of the Buddha, in the Passion of Christ, in the countless tales where one must pass through death to find new life. When an individual suffers and feels broken, Jung would remind them that they are walking a path as old as humanity, and that the story does not end in despair. The myth itself carries the promise of transformation. Jung also saw that the loss of myth in modern times had left people spiritually starving. When society reduces life to statistics, economics, and surface appearances, the soul longs for depth and story. People may think they no longer believe in myths, yet they unconsciously live them. They project gods onto politicians, demons onto enemies, saviors onto lovers. Without awareness, myth can distort and control. With awareness, it can guide and heal. Jung's teaching is not to return blindly to old religions but to rediscover the symbolic dimension of existence, where every event, every dream, every relationship carries a depth beyond its surface. At the center of this symbolic life stands the self, which for Jung is far greater than the conscious ego. The ego wants control, certainty, and recognition, but the self seeks wholeness. The self appears in dreams as a wise figure, as a mandala, as a guiding presence that seems both within and beyond us. To move toward the self is to move toward integration, where the opposites of life find their place in a larger order. Jung described encounters with the self as moments of the sacred, where life suddenly feels illuminated by meaning, as though the soul has touched eternity. This perspective shifts the way one sees the ordinary. A recurring dream is no longer dismissed as nonsense but regarded as a message. A period of crisis becomes not a meaningless accident, but a stage in the mythic journey. The tension between conflicting desires is not a flaw to be eliminated but an energy to be balanced. Even solitude takes on dignity, for in the silence of solitude the self speaks most clearly. Jung's vision was therefore not only psychological but deeply spiritual. He did not ask people to believe in dogma, but to listen to the living symbols that rise from within. These symbols, if honored, weave the individual life into the fabric of humanity, where one small story becomes part of a vast and timeless whole. In this way, Jung shows us that to live deeply is not to escape the world but to see it with new eyes. Every struggle becomes a passage in a myth. Every joy becomes a glimpse of eternity. Every dream becomes a dialogue with the depths of the soul. In the final part, we will bring these threads together, exploring how Jung's philosophy offers not only understanding but also a way of walking through life with courage, humility, and meaning that endures beyond the fleeting concerns of the moment. To bring Jung's vision to its completion, we must see how all these lessons gather into a way of living. Jung never spoke as a detached philosopher. His words came from the fire of his own struggles, from nights haunted by visions, from years of inner confrontation that could have destroyed him but instead revealed the depth of the psyche. His philosophy is not a luxury for quiet afternoons of study. It is a compass for those who are lost, a light for those who walk through darkness, and a reminder that life is worth living even when it feels unbearable. The shadow, individuation, the unconscious, suffering, love, meaning, myth, the union of opposites, and the self, these are not separate lessons but parts of one whole. Together they describe the human journey from fragmentation toward wholeness. They remind us that the soul is not something to be explained away but something to be lived. Every person will face their shadow. Every person will wear a mask. Every person will suffer, love, dream, and seek meaning. What Jung offers is not an escape from this but a path through it, a way to move with honesty and courage through the inevitable storms of existence. In this sense, Jung's philosophy is a call to responsibility. To live unconsciously is to let fear and projection govern life, to blame others for what we refuse to see in ourselves. To live consciously, in the Jungian sense, is to take ownership of our darkness as well as our light. It means admitting that we are capable of both cruelty and compassion, that we are both fragile and strong. This humility does not weaken us. It makes us real, and only in reality can we find meaning. It is also a call to courage. Individuation demands that we walk paths no one else can walk for us. It means leaving behind the safety of masks, risking misunderstanding, and standing alone when necessary. Yet, it also means discovering a source of strength that no external approval can give. The individuated soul does not need to shout or dominate. Its power comes from its authenticity, from the quiet certainty of a life aligned with its inner truth. At the same time, Jung's philosophy is a call to imagination. The unconscious speaks in images, and to honor it is to reawaken the symbolic life. In art, in myth, in dreams, we are given glimpses of eternity. These glimpses remind us that life is never flat, never merely mechanical. Even in despair, the soul continues to speak. To pay attention to these whispers is to recover a sense of wonder, to see the world not as empty, but as alive with hidden meaning. And finally, it is a call to meaning itself. Jung saw meaning as the medicine that heals the wounds of modern life. Without meaning, wealth feels hollow, and success becomes empty. With meaning, even suffering becomes bearable. Meaning does not erase pain, but it gives it context, transforming it into part of a story worth living. The greatest gift of Jung's philosophy is that it restores dignity to existence. It tells us that no matter how ordinary or broken a life may seem, within it lies the possibility of transformation, the possibility of touching the self, the center that connects the finite with the infinite. In the end, Jung's life lessons are not about becoming perfect. They are about becoming whole. They do not ask us to transcend humanity but to embrace it fully, to see that every weakness carries a hidden strength, every darkness hides a seed of light, and every ending is also a beginning. To live in this way is to walk with both humility and awe, knowing that the soul is deeper than we can ever fully grasp, yet close enough to guide us with every step. This is why Jung's words continue to resonate, decades after his passing. He spoke not only to his own time but to the timeless human condition. His philosophy reminds us that the task of life is not to avoid struggle but to shape it into meaning, not to deny complexity but to embrace it until it reveals its hidden order. To walk this path is to become, as Jung said, who we truly are, and in that becoming, to discover that the privilege of a lifetime is not only personal but universal. It is the privilege of being fully, deeply, and courageously human.